Surprise, surprise. Maybe.
We do have a very special episode planned for you because we are talking about the Carolina Panthers. Also, a little bit of Chiefs heavy personnel. Let's go.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our partners in Possible here at KC Sports Network. So appreciative of them. Maddie, your facial reaction when I started talking made it seem like my mic was a little bit too hot. Was that it?
No.
Okay.
I was trying to send out a tweet about our show that was starting, and I just had made a typo. So my face was of me making a typo. But I'm glad that we're getting this connection where you can just see my face and know exactly what's happening. So like we're right on the same page here.
That's great. Yeah. Some would say that's great, wouldn't they, Matthew?
I think a lot of people would say there's a lot of stuff that's great. The past few shows, they've been great, but we've been missing something. We've been missing a little element of the show, and I think it's time. I think it's time the triumphant return of the one, the only, the greatest person we know, Craig W. for winning Stout. What's up, buddy?
You're muted.
Oh, it's even better.
The music threw me off. I was still muted. The music threw me off. I couldn't do anything about it. Hey, guys, I needed to come here today because I got 3 problems. The first one, everybody stop asking me if I'm good or okay. Everybody. I'm sick and tired of random people asking me if I'm okay. I'm not okay because you keep asking me if I'm okay. The second thing, keep my name out of your 5-star reviews. Keep leaving the 5-star reviews and keep my name out of the 5-star reviews. Third, you have mentioned my name, not just on this podcast, but on KCSN approximately 69,420 times over the past month. Like I'm some sort of crappy Beetlejuice that just shows up after you've done it enough times. That's not the case. It happens to be the case today, but that's not the case. Do you guys know that I'm not on the show? Is that what's happening here? You don't remember?
Right now.
I am on the show right now. No, in all seriousness, I've really missed doing this. I really missed my 2 pals, talking football with them. So I reached out today and I went, hey, let's talk a little football. And these guys, I kind of had to persuade them. They initially said, nah, we're good without you. We
had found our flow.
You did. It's time for me to come in and wreck it. That's what happens.
Now when this goes 77 minutes, goes 77 minutes, it's all on you. Oh man, I was kind of hoping the music was going to play the entire time you were on, honestly.
No, it was really wrecking my ability to talk. It was really giving me a whole lot of trouble here.
The music came on, and Craig just, we could see him. He just buried his head in his hands. He was like, oh, no. What am I doing here? Look, Craig, you said you'd be back from time to time. We gave you June, and you're back. So that's, it's good to have you here for tonight's episode. And, I'm sure
time of football.
Yeah, it's just peak football time. I think he just really wanted to talk about the Carolina Panthers.
That's what it was. Favorite football team outside of the Chiefs, the Carolina Panthers. That's clearly what it is here.
Yeah,
I have a lot of people.
Yeah, that's clearly why he's here. But we're very glad to just hang out. I mean, look, the only thing that's changed is we talk physically more. I mean, we talk every day, literally.
I get to talk to your faces tonight. That's the difference. Yes.
So we're gonna catch up. We're having a full-fledged golf conversation before the show even started. I mean, I jumped in 10 minutes early before the show started, and there is Craig re-gripping a club. not only is he into golf, but he is also one of those people that is able to regrip his own clubs, folks.
It's so easy. Why do you make it out to be a big deal, Ken?
Because it is a big deal. You want to know why? Because not everyone is great enough to be able to do stuff like that.
And that is the quota of golf talk for Maddie. Like, I think we hit it.
Not everyone can put people on Mars or the moon. So, I mean, like, I would assume re-gloving, re-whatevering a golf club is, sure.
Re-gloving.
Yeah. Let's go.
I can re-glove my hand very easily in golf. That's one of the few things I'm capable of doing. Yeah, we're excited to have Craig back. We will actually talk football. And hey, look, here's the deal, Craig. I think it's kind of fun to keep your memory alive a little bit on the show as like the third character.
Not.
I love updating people in your life, like I'm talking to somebody about like my kids or something. Yeah, Craig's doing great. Like, hey, look, I've got a video of him golfing and all that. It's fun to keep the memory alive, especially since it makes you so mad and you really can't control it.
It infuriates me.
Yeah.
The only thing I can control is not listening to two of my friends talk about football. And I'm really conflicted here. Conflicted.
And I believe based on every single conversation we have after the show, it sounds like you've listened to every single one still. So I'm just going to keep doing it. So,
I mean, I was already an avid listener to the shows that I wasn't on. I'm not like you, Kent. I do, keep up with what my friends are doing from time to time. And so,
My favorite part about that was getting ready to do the draft again this year was Kent saying, hey guys, you should go back and listen to last year's 17 hours of coverage of the draft to figure out where we can be better. But he doesn't listen weekly, but he's like, you should go back and listen to that in 17 hours from last year.
Yep.
I think the joke was it's because I was actually on those. So I just went back and watched them because I was actually on them.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I did skip all of my breaks on that, during that coverage too. So there's that. Okay, we should probably talk football, I guess. Sure. I guess. Maddie, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of some of the heavy personnel usage of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's something we've seen them use to success in the past. So yeah, I'm going to give you a chance to cook here a little bit, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start it obviously the Chiefs offense last year was not quite as good as it was the year before or some of the other like better versions of what the offense had been over the Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid era. Like there was obviously some struggles last year and there's various different reasons. One of them though that gets overshadowed specifically on the offense is like, what about the heavy personnel? What about 12? And now they don't have a fullback anymore. So what about the multi-tight end sets? 12 personnel, 13 personnel. The Chiefs kind of turned it around in the playoffs, especially with 13 personnel, but it still wasn't what it had been before. So we're just going to kind of start with some like basic numbers from last year. And last year, the Chiefs were in 12 personnel 23% of the time. They were in 13 personnel 7% of the time during the regular season. That's still pretty high. Like those still rank, 4th and 5th respectively in the NFL. However, if you jump back to the year before, and this goes back other seasons as well, they were in 12 personnel 30% of the time and 13 personnel 10% of the time, which both ranked top 3. So it's a small jump in like how much of where they rank, but the actual percentages are pretty significantly different. We're looking at like a 5% different of 12 personnel, looking at a couple percent in 13. So they clearly stepped back the volume at which they went heavy. And like, I just thought in general, that was kind of interesting given the weakness of last year's team was a poor wide receiver room. So why were they putting them on the field more frequently than in years past? Like, I just think we should just start with the volume at why they went heavy less. Anybody have any ideas why?
I mean, I think to the point of, previous years, they've had guys that maybe stretch the field a little bit more. Even, 2 years ago when we talk about, MVS and McCole were kind of the field stretchers. Teams hadn't kicked down into single high yet. So it was an advantageous look. They were still wanting to play too high against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid because of the route concepts, because of their propensity to still push the ball down the field despite not having somebody that they really trusted as a deep threat. So it made a lot more sense because you can still be in 13 personnel and challenge down the field enough to make people worry. Justin Watson's not the fastest guy in the book, but he's not slow. He still gets vertical well. So there were a lot of 13 personnel looks where you'd have Travis Kelce out there, you would have Justin Watson out there, and there was still enough of a threat to where teams still had to play too high, and it gave you basically an advantageous box that you got to run out of in that scenario. Last year, we saw a lot more single high. So, the team finally adjusted to the fact that they did not have that downfield guy. So you didn't want to condense it even more. You didn't want to trot out the 13 and the 12 personnel quite as much because, teams were already stuffing the box a little bit more, trying to take away the intermediate stuff. Why put more intermediate options on the field when you can trot out some other guys that maybe can win in other ways, in the offense? Even though they didn't, maybe you can make defenses play a little bit different.
So another just kind of thinking out loud here thing, do we think it has anything to do with Travis Kelce, like trying to manage his load a little bit differently too,
Maybe.
right? Because keeping him involved was, like trying to find ways to keep him involved and keep him fresh. Maybe it was sacrificing, that to some degree, potentially. I don't know if it's just a way to kind of try to keep him a little bit more fresh. I don't know. Like that could be a contributing factor to that. But yeah, I mean, you kind of, maybe they didn't like their tight end room as much as they did,
Maybe.
Like, I don't know. It's just, I think there's some theories there to that though.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like I'm just trying to think in my head. The Travis Kelce idea is probably like the best one I can come up with. And even if I look here through the personnel groupings last year, when again the wide receivers were considered a bigger weakness probably than they were the year before. I don't think maybe they didn't think that going into the year. Right? Maybe they were anticipating a Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, MVS all jumping up in what they were able to produce. And the year before, it was more unknowns because they were bringing in like all new guys. So maybe they thought there was more. But even if you go back to 2022, they not only did 11, 12, 13 personnel, they still got two fullbacks, or two backs on the field. They had 22 personnel, 21 personnel at a low rate, but they still did it. Last year, not at all. They didn't have it. It was just 11, 12, 13, and then 1% of their plays came out of 0-1 personnel. So like have fun with that. But it was weird. Just looking through the numbers at how often they went heavy last year already makes you think, they're dropping back a little bit in what they did. Now, like I said, they got better in the playoffs, but they still did it at a lower volume. But here's where it even got crazier. They could not run at all out of these heavy personnels. The run game took a dumpster dive. Okay, so in 2022, out of 12 personnel, their EPA per rush was positive. It was 0.05, and out of 13 personnel, 0.09. Last year, both were negative. 0.09 out of 12 personnel and 0.024 out of 13 personnel. It was bad. Their volume on heavy personnel last year only took, a couple spots down. They went from top 3 to top 5. In terms of efficiency, EPA for play, they went from 1st and 2nd out of heavy personnel to 7th and 12th. Not very good. So not only they do it less, they were worse at it. Like, what is going on here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll go.
It's what? No, go ahead, Kent. Go ahead.
No, I'm not used to you being here, so.
You were just looking to vibe off of Maddie. I get it. No, it's very interesting. Now, I don't think that any of us would have looked at last year's offensive line and said, oh, wow, they were really good run blockers last year. I feel like they were definitely better at that the year before. Certainly not having somebody that they really trusted to be like that inline tight end to create that extra gap. Somebody that, was a fullback that could kind of line up as a part of the heavy personnel in line as well and do that. They got a little more finesse with some of the ways that they did things. Now, for everything that everybody wants to talk about with Orlando Brown Jr., he was a hell of a run blocker. So, being able to tee up off of him, being able to pull Trey Smith to his side, that creates kind of a giant wall there with Creed Humphrey, Joe Tooney, Trey Smith pulling into a gap, and Orlando Brown Jr. So I understand how you can get to that with another, kind of top-notch blocker there. Cut to this year, though. Like, it still defies a little bit of the logic that they were so bad against that. Yes, maybe Isaiah Pacheco took a little bit of a step back. They have more tape on him. Teams knew what gaps to fill, tried to make him, wrong more often than not on some of the inside zone looks. That certainly could be the case as well. But I really do think it's because there was no threat. There were so many more, defenders that were in the box because they needed to be. The target was Rashee Rice, 10 yards, 8 to 10 yards down the field, or Travis Kelce, 8 to 10 yards down the field. It wasn't anything more than that. You didn't worry about it because even if they did throw it, it wasn't caught. They were dropping it. So the Chiefs didn't make teams pay often enough to where Now they can't get out of the way of the fact that maybe the run blocking wasn't as good. There's a little more tape on Pacheco, and you get to stack another person in the box. I just think it all coalesced into something that just wasn't good for the run game.
Like personnel decisions on defense. What kind of choices do they make based on, what the Chiefs are rolling out there? Are they, how are they going to treat certain things? Are they going to honor Travis Kelce as a true tight end? Are they going to, respect the blocking ability of Noah Gray and Blake Bell? And by the way, Blake Bell does not have a job right now. So like you're looking at a guy that has not been scooped up. It is in July and he has not found an opportunity in the NFL. So, there's something to be said there about all that. Right. So, Maddie, do you have any else on this? Because I do have a question if you don't.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go a little bit more into it. I think it's so perfect that Craig's back for this because he has said two things that I think we're going to lead into the next point here, was just like, why? Or coming up this next season, what's going to be different, right? How do they get back to not only getting back into the heavy personnel more often, but how do they make themselves more efficient? And Craig's kind of stole my thunder here, which, I mean, just maybe we should kick him off again. I don't know.
Kick me off.
I think he kind of nailed it. The teams played the Chiefs with a little bit more of a loaded box last year. Teams were less going middle field open coverage, a lot less too high looks. They were, whether it was at the snap or rolling down into it, just single high coverage a ton, because nobody was afraid of Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Justin Watson or Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore or insert whoever running by them as a vertical threat. There was no speed threat on the outside. So when the Chiefs went heavy, they weren't afraid of MVS or Justin Watson just running by them. That wasn't a threat anymore. They weren't giving them the respect. Now, you might be asking, well, why in 2022 did they do that? And realistically, like, they probably didn't have to. Just teams didn't know that yet. You can actually look, the average depth of target of both MVS and Watson went up in this past season, and yet they were significant. Well, Watson actually was probably, I guess, just as efficient, but MVS was significantly less efficient working downfield despite having more favorable looks. So the Chiefs' inability to push the ball downfield, and I think teams saw that from going back and looking at the tape last year, and then the way this season started, they probably just saw like, hey, the Chiefs want to go out there with heavier personnel. Guess what? We don't really have to worry about getting beat over the top. We'll just play man coverage. We'll just match these guys one-on-one on the outside, make it hard for Kelce to win over the middle of the field. And then now we have an extra guy to defend the runs. Like, I think that's kind of how they got here. I think that might change this year with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. I don't know. That might just be me throwing darts.
I mean, it's an educated guess. One that maybe you put a little bit of money on. No, I would love nothing more than for teams to come out and go, we knew how to beat the Chiefs last year. We're going to line up and do that again, because good luck, man. Like, you're going to be in for a really bad time. Andy Reid's tired of the box getting stacked against him. Andy Reid's tired of being able to close out games by leaning a little bit more on the run. Andy Reid's tired of having two of his best weapons in Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice getting hit, being as covered as they are, not having the space that they need to run. Like, all of that matters. And so that's why we have said all offseason here, we, the three of us, said all offseason here that, having Hollywood, having Worthy matters in so many more ways for Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce and Isaiah Pacheco than we're even going to know until we get, like, we can hypothesize, oh, wow, their production is going to go way up. There's going to be less people in the box. I always look at how is a defense going to defend things. When I always come to the table with that, people want to talk about personnel on the field, that sort of stuff. I want to talk about how do you cover those four options effectively. And effectively is you put a lid on it and then you plant downhill and you try and limit everything that's intermediate. It's very similar to what the Chiefs offenses looked like in the past, in the early years of Patrick Mahomes, only you've got more than one guy that can get downfield. Now, the guy that got downfield in those times was elite at doing so, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. Now you got 2 guys. Now you got more things on your plate, and you have more intermediate options. You got 2 guys. You legitimately have 4 guys at any point that you are terrified of them touching the ball. You are going to play the most umbrella coverage that you can against that offense, which just means that if you turn around out of a heavier personnel with some of these guys on the field, with some of those problems on the field, and you hand it off to Isaiah Pacheco, there's going to be less guys in the box. There just is. So he's going to have more room to run. He's going to be getting ahead of steam before he hits the second level. It's just going to matter so much more to the run game, to what they can do off of play action when teams start trying to come down and stop the run. Like it opens up and unlocks so much more simply by having the speed threat. And the Chiefs agree with that. They traded a whole bunch of picks for McCole Hardman to come in and then turned around and added 2 guys and brought McCole back this year. They need that speed on the field.
I think we're going to find out very quickly, just in theory too, like on paper, how teams feel about the Chiefs too, because the Baltimore Ravens are week 1 and the last game for the Baltimore Ravens in the 2023 season was against a previous version of the Kansas City Chiefs. So what changes in that scenario where you've got the speed of Xavier Worthy, you've got the speed of Hollywood Brown? We'll see if Rashee Rice is able to work underneath in that game or not. We'll find out. But yeah, at minimum, you've got those 2 burners and Travis Kelce on the field. What is that going to do to Baltimore? Like, how much is going to change, right? Like, how much is really going to change for them? Looking at, and no games have passed between the last time that these 2 teams matched up. So like, that's going to be kind of a litmus test for how teams want to treat and kind of honor this. One thing I do want to just kind of, it's piggybacking a little bit off of this is, do we think that the Chiefs have the personnel in their tight end room to really be effective in heavier personnel? Because, Travis Kelce is aging. Breaking news. Noah Gray, good blocker. Jared Wiley, we'll see.
Yep.
Does that open up the opportunity? Irv Smith, are they keeping 4? Are they going to keep 4? Does this encourage them, entice them to keep 4 so they can be more effective blocking from heavier personnel? Like, that's the personnel they have on their roster is a big question for me, I think, in their ability to go back to that a little bit more.
So 2 years ago, when they were a lot better at it, Blake Bell barely played. That was the year he was coming back from injury. I mean, it was essentially Travis Kelce and then Noah Gray, and I forget like whoever else they were even trying to work in that year. Jody Fortson, I guess, kind of counted as a tight end that year. Is that really any different than what we're going to get from a Jared Wiley or Irv Smith, right? So they have been effective in heavier personnel and multi-tight end sets without having a quote unquote good blocking, a point of attack blocking tight end. Now, I think they've been better when they've had Blake Bell in that role. I think you can even go back to last year. They struggled in it, but you can pick out games where they heavily used them where he was a good point of attack blocker. So I think not having a guy like that is probably going to cause, I don't want to say limitations, but it probably puts a cap on how physical of a downhill rushing attack they can have out of multi-tight end sets. But this is a team that's never just overpowered you when they've done this either. It's still been misdirection. It's still been making like, okay, we now have at least 2 athletic tight ends on the field, sometimes 3. Yeah, you might match them with nickel and not get completely blown off the ball, but you also still have to respect all of them leaking out into the flat and getting in the open field. When we pull one of them across the behind the line of scrimmage, is he looping around to be a blocker? Is he coming around to block, cut somebody? Is he going to arc up to the next level and block a backer? Or is he going to leak out to the flat? So it's just the way they utilize them. They've been effective. And I do think they have the personnel to get back into doing more of that and be more efficient than they were 2 years ago. I think the issue is probably more along the offensive line that, again, Craig also alluded to earlier. They're just not that good at run blocking at either tackle spot last year compared to what they were 2 years ago. And I don't know if it's getting a lot better this year. It might with Awanya Moore stepping in. It might with Kingsley's been able to pick up the game right away. But on the other side, Juwan Taylor's never going to be a dominant run blocker. That's just not his game. So I think it's more offensive line dependent than tight end dependent in terms specifically the run game.
Which could allude to the fact that maybe they're going to lean more on zone insert, trying to do stuff like, the guard, GH counter, lining up a Jared Wiley as an H back and pulling him with Trey Smith to get guys out in space. That works. Noah Gray as well, not to exclude him. Jared Wiley just did a lot of that at TCU as well. He's very familiar with doing those sorts of things. So I think that alludes to more the misdirection side of things to try and keep teams honest. Conversely, Jared Wiley's lined up as an H-back. You're going to try and play off of him. You're going to try and stop the run. It's a GH counter. It's coming the opposite way. Jared Wiley releases up the seam, and guess what? Now you've got another vertical threat. He's certainly got the speed to run up the seam and test and keep a safety honest as well. So teams are going to try and figure out ways to defend some of these Chiefs heavier personnel looks. And a lot of them, I'm going to guess, just a lot of them are going to probably rely on sub packages a little bit more, just because it's going to be the least bad for the defense. You just line up in the nickel and pray that you don't get run all over every game, all game long. That's where the Chiefs can mix in the misdirection a little bit more, try and catch them off of play action a little bit more. It just, again, like I said, opens up the playbook a lot more to where you don't necessarily have to have that same dominant run blocking set of tackles that maybe they had a couple of years ago. You can line up and say, you know what, we're going to be fine. Just kind of running misdirection, running, basically some gap stuff, that sort of thing. Lean on that more, have Pacheco get up ahead of steam, and play off of the fact that you don't have elite run blockers up there, but you can still move some bodies.
All right, we're going to take a break. We will be back to talk about the Carolina Panthers, and maybe we'll just dovetail into just seeing how Craig's doing right after this.
No.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Look, here's the truth. We knew that no one was going to tune in to hear us talk about the Carolina Panthers. And so we talked to Craig and we said, Craig, if there was, we put out the Craig signal and we just figured, hey, look, if anybody's going to watch this episode talking about the Carolina Panthers, it just, we have to get Craig on. So that's exactly.
The Craig symbol is just a beer. Like they just hold a beer above his head and I appeared. That's all it is.
I thought it was a golf club now.
No, just a beer.
It's a golf. Well, hey, where do you have beers? On the golf course. I seriously, one of the first things that went through my head when you're like, hey, can I come on? That was like, wait, it's the Panthers. You sure about that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, Craig, I'd love to know what the quality of the Carolina Panthers roster is.
Well, it's bad. I can tell you guys that.
Wait, hold on. Before we get too far, I have a serious question for Craig. Who is the singular most boring team in all of the NFL?
Ooh.
Just the worst, not the team you despise the most. Who is the team that you have the least thoughts about ever because they're just boring?
Tennessee Titans.
Oh, okay.
That's a pretty good one.
It's not a bad one. I think being a Chiefs
fan, Will Levis is trying to make some news this offseason.
Being a Chiefs fan in history, yes, so like, okay, that's not a bad one. Kent and I had come to the agreement. It's without a doubt the New Orleans Saints. Post Sean Payton Saints, like they don't exist.
Yeah,
I don't think you get it right. But okay, sorry, we can continue.
No, that's pretty good. I mean, no, the Saints. That's a good one too. The Panthers are up there. They're just bad enough to make them interesting, and they're trying to do. I'm not sure. Like I'm legitimately not sure what they are trying to do here. They traded away Brian Burns this offseason. They traded away DJ Moore last season. Like, what are you doing? You've got a young core. You're building around a young quarterback. Those are the years that you want to keep those sorts of players on there. Then you go, okay, well, maybe they're just accumulating some picks. They like this draft better than everybody else in the NFL. Sure, maybe that's what it is. Then they go out and they have a draft where I look at it and I go, okay, there may be a little juice there, but you don't have a whole bunch of guys that you're relying on playing soon. So you didn't really help a young quarterback too terribly much. They made a trade that really worked out for him that I liked. We'll get to that in a little bit. And you didn't really add a ton to the defense to make you any better. How is this team measurably better than last year? And I don't see very many spots going into last year that they are a hell of a lot better, and they were awful last year. Uncompetitive, a bad football team. I can't see how they're much better than that this year unless just a light switch kind of flips for a whole bunch of people.
Okay, I have an answer for how they might be better, but we'll have to approach that as that situation comes. Roster wise, Yeah, it's not good, but I think they've done some nice stuff, right? Like some of those sales, I'm sure I'll talk about them later. But like they've added wide receivers over the past few seasons. Whether it's been in the draft, trading for, bringing in Adam Thielen, who had like a career resurgence last year. Like they've put guys around that should theoretically provide safety outlets or be helpful for their quarterback there in Bryce Young. Now, the problem was last year, all their wide receivers were the same guy, and like none of them could do anything different. So this year they go out and they trade for a Deontay Johnson from the Steelers, drafted Xavier Legette. They still have Jonathan Mingo. Like they now have some complementary pieces in the wide receiver room to go along with Big Tommy Trimble at tight end, and they also drafted JT Sanders. So like they're trying to put offensive weapons around for Bryce Young. They also went and paid a ton of money to offensive linemen, especially on the interior, which is supposed to help keep things clean for Bryce Young, who does need a clean pocket because he is shorter. He has to stand narrow. And then when he steps, he's got to have a lot of foot space to step into it to get some of the power in his throw. So like, I think they are doing everything they can to help Bryce Young. So you got to give them a hat tip for that. The problem is they've had to sacrifice so much on the defensive side of the ball to get pieces that you hope mesh well enough, that you hope have enough talent. I just listed off a bunch of guys on offense. Are any of those players dragging a mediocre quarterback forward? Are any of those guys making a Brock Purdy into winning a playoff caliber quarterback? Probably not. So like you're really hoping that Bryce Young is a dude to elevate those guys versus those players elevating him. And then you flip to the other side. They've just had to let everybody worthwhile on that defense, essentially not on a rookie deal, go. So you're not strong on defense and you have a bunch of good, but not like good enough players to drag mediocre quarterback. They just kind of seem stuck.
I think this is a roster that is better than the 2023 version, and I think it's not a bottom 5 team. I still don't think this is a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I think the NFC, they can be a little spicy with this roster. And the reason is, and I think this is ultimately the find out year for Bryce Young. They have given him not a lot of room for excuse. I do, because they've established the offensive line. Like that is the thing that's the most important thing, to me when I look at this is, you think you have, capable tackles, but you've really firmed up the interior of your offensive line and you've spent ridiculous amounts of money to firm that up. And because you have to find out if, the reality was that, some of that interior pressure was just too much for Bryce Young to overcome. Well, if you eliminate that and you give him a guy that can stretch the field a little bit with, Xavier Legette, you give him a reliable route runner that can get open in Deontay Johnson, and you give him a stable veteran Adam Thielen. Yeah, it's not great. And we'll see with Jonathan Mingo and Terrace Marshall, some of these other guys. I mean, Amir Smith-Marsette's around there. But I think this is a roster that can let you at least figure out a course for the future. And so, especially on the offensive side of the ball, it is definitely piecemealed on the defensive side of the ball for sure. If like you're just kind of looking at some of the pieces, it's built around Derek Brown, and they've made some, veteran signings on that side of the ball that just kind of try to shore it up. But you're at least going to be able to find out what you have on the offensive side of the ball with this roster. My question to you now, Craig, is what do you think the quality of this coaching staff is?
Quality of coaching staff, TBD. Not a whole lot of experience there. Like you look at it, they went out, they hired Dave Canales, who has zero head coaching experience and has bounced around a lot, has barely, even been an offensive coordinator. I believe just 1 year he was an offensive coordinator, and it was a good offense, but not a great offense there. I'm a big Ejiro Evero fan, but Ejiro Evero, we haven't seen operate without talent. We have largely seen him have a couple of dudes that he got to rely on, a couple of veterans, a couple of players that he really trusted. So I'm a big fan of him, but you're also placing a whole lot of gamble on the fact that, he hasn't really done this without a whole bunch of guys. And then Brad Idzik is just a guy. Like at this point, the way that they've operated this offseason, they did not make splashy hires in some of these things. They did not try and go out and get a guy, even, getting rid of their GM and just promoting from within rather than trying to go out and really trying to make a measurable difference was a real head scratcher for me. It just feels very status quo to me, and not something that, if you're going to rely on a whole bunch of draft picks. You're going to rely on a young quarterback. You're going to try and make real measurable strides. You're going to try and get the sum of the parts to be better, or, the whole to be better than the sum of the parts. If you're going to try and do that and maximize that, you need to make a splash. You need to go out and get a guy that can do that. I don't think Dave Canales can do that.
So I'm kind of high on Dave Canales. I like what he did a lot with the Bucs last year. And even if you go back, he kind of helped Geno Smith reinvent himself into a good quarterback there in Seattle. Then he moves on to Tampa, and he took Baker Mayfield, who I understand there's talent there. Like, he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason, but like, he had clearly had ups and downs. He turned him into, again, a very competent starting quarterback once again in Tampa by kind of having him rework his game. So he kind of rebuilds what Geno Smith is. He rebuilds what Baker Mayfield is. And now you bring him into Carolina. Like, I like taking the swing on a younger offensive-minded head coach that has had success specifically with quarterbacks. Now, he hasn't necessarily had his own guy. He hasn't had to take a rookie and mold him into whatever they're going to be, but he's taken 2 guys that essentially had failed at their first or second stops in the NFL and turned them into starting quarterbacks who got paid, right? So I kind of like Canales as an offensive mind. I don't know what this will be as a head coach. He's young. This is his real first crack at this, of being in control of the whole team. There could be a lot of decisions that he just simply misses on from a team management, from a, I'm in charge of everybody situation. So there is some ups and downs there. I love Evero as well. Like, I think that's where I have a little bit, this is where I think this team could be better than last year. Evero and Canales together, like those two working your offensive and defensive side with a slight bit improvement, I think, of the overall talent on the roster, I can see them just simply taking a jump because they have more innovative, more creative minds on both sides of the ball. Now, this doesn't matter because if any of them wear a baseball hat, Tepper might come down there and just slap them right across the face. So who knows?
They certainly will have more energy in that building with Canales and Evero than they did last year.
No,
I think go.
No,
sorry. I think Ejiro Evero actually interviewed for I think he actually interviewed for the Panthers head coaching job in one of the last 2 cycles because David Tepper is the most impatient human on the planet and he's just throwing cash around like it's crazy and just paying everyone, it seems, these days. But yeah, I think I'm intrigued by it. I actually think it could work because I do think that the recent track record with Dave Canales, as he relates to quarterbacks and how he's worked with them, has been very positive. And I think he did some really, really good things in Tampa Bay, as Matty was kind of saying too. So, I think he obviously had to sell this organization. You would think, it is David Tepper, but you in normal circumstances, being able to convince an organization that you are the right voice to be in the ear of a quarterback that you desperately need to work because you have mortgaged your future around securing this guy when you did it in 2023. No, there's got to be something there. I don't want to give. I'm not going to give David Tepper credit if it works. I guess I don't know, but I don't want to give him credit for anything. But I do have some hope for Dave Canales. There's just a lot of positivity around him. Really, like, a lot of people just rave about him as a human too. And so I'm rooting for him. But Frank Wright, also a wonderful human, and David Tepper showed zero patience for him. Anyway, let's go to a new addition. Craig, give me one.
New addition, I'm going with Deontay Johnson. Bryce Young, when we have seen him play well in college, is on time, balls out of his hands, within structure. Deontay Johnson is one of the few guys, and we talked about him a little bit earlier this offseason. I really wanted him for the Chiefs because, as we've seen, he just gets separation. Doesn't matter what the route he's running, he just is able to find separation. Drops have been a problem throughout his career. A lot better last year. His drop percentage went way down, but it is a little bit of a problem. Bryce Young needs somebody that can be open on time every time. It's why Adam Thielen was helpful to him. But Adam Thielen is 34 this year, so he's probably going to take another step back. He needs another reliable guy to step in and be able to do that. I think Deontay Johnson's a really good fit with Bryce Young. I just think he might be the only really good fit with Bryce Young with 34-year-old Adam Thielen out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest one, and we'll kind of have to see. We'll see how him and Thielen work together. I think they can, but like they do a little bit of the same like ideas. But like it's probably a good idea to have both those guys for Bryce Young to get the ball to, and so that's why I'm going to go with the entire interior offensive line of this team. Now, granted, Austin Corbett, I believe, was there last year, right? Or was he new as well? Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt are the two big paid offensive guards that they brought in. Protection for Bryce is going to be important. Like I said, he needs a lot of pocket space to work in because he's a little bit shorter. Those windows got to stay a little bit open. They got to stay wide for him to see around the offensive line, to deliver a ball, especially over the middle of the field. He needs the space. He needs the space to, again, he's got to stand with his feet kind of narrow to be taller. Because when you throw and when you stride out, you get shorter, right? And like you can't see as high when your feet get wider. So he needs that space to be able to step into all of his throws. I think it's interesting that Austin Corbett and Robert Hunt, again, I don't know if Corbett counts here, but those two guys, 6'4" and 6'5", those aren't short interior offensive linemen. Now, Damian Lewis is short. He's a 6'2"-ish. So like they did get one short guard, but I wondered if I went and looked, I was like, I don't remember how tall Robert Hunt was. I know he played tackle at La Tech. So I was like, at ULL, Louisiana. And I was like, I think he was tall. I don't think he was short. So they have two tall guys on the interior. That's a decision. That's a decision to make, especially when you're throwing the ball to Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson and maybe even Xavier Legette that are all going to have ADOTs of like 6. Like that's a hard up and down ball over a 6'5" guard that you got going on there.
Hey, but at least they only played Damian Lewis $13.2 million a year because he's so short. That's clearly why he got paid so much. It could work out
great too. That they might be able to rely on the running game with these guys. These are all powerful interior guys. They literally could do exactly what they're trying to do. Make a solid pocket. Bryce Young now gets to navigate by throwing between the passing lanes instead of over the offensive line. It could work out really well. I just thought it was funny that they have two really tall interior offensive linemen for Bryce Young, but like clearly the idea is there to make a clean pocket up the middle for him to step into all these throws.
March 11th. Panthers sign Robert Hunt. I said a 6'6" guard for Bryce Young to see over.
Yeah, like I'm telling you. So maybe they're only throwing left. Maybe the quick game's all left.
Or Kent, as he's about to announce, an apple box for Bryce Young to stand on at the top of his drop. That's the real big addition.
That's the new addition. Is
Chuba Hubbard just gets on all fours and Bryce Young just hops up there to throw the ball.
I think Robert Hunt graded as the best cutter. He's just an elite cutter. So that's what they're just could be cutting dudes down left and right. Rip. But yeah,
thinking USA basketball.
I'll go with Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas. They've kind of got an interesting running back room. I don't know if it's good. I think there's some talent there. Miles Sanders always been hurt. Chuba Hubbard has shown promise as a player, but I don't know if he's a guy that you want carrying a full workload. So Jonathan Brooks, yes, he was injured, heading into the pre-draft process, but I think he wound up RB1 for us in the KCSN draft guide, if I remember correctly. And it's a player that, I think he could wind up being the type of bell cow player that, that they might want at the running back spot. But when you look at, we talked about, I would say the thinness and inexperience of the wide receiver room. Outside of that, Deontay Johnson and Thielen, you've got an unproven in Xavier Legette, who's a first-round pick. But then outside of that, a lot of unproven. Run the ball. Turn around, run the football. Turn around, hand the football off. And you know what? They've got, an interesting stable of tight ends with Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders. But I think Jonathan Brooks could be a really nice addition and a sneaky great add for this team, especially later in the season if he's, kind of recovering from injury. So, Craig, players to watch. Go.
Oh, man. I was trying to choose between one of these two, but I'm just picking them both. Dane Jackson and Troy Hill. Those are currently the guys that are slotted to be nickelback or the opposite cornerback from J.C. Horn. I have all faith in the world that J.C. Horn is going to have a good season for the Panthers, but they don't have anybody opposite him, and their safety play is not great either. So they're not going to have a whole bunch of guys that are going to be able to cover outside of J.C. Horn. My players to watch are Dane Jackson and Troy Hill because they just need one of those guys to step up so that they can shift some safety help to the other guy so that they can try and put together a pass defense that is not terrible, which it was, it was one of those last year that you looked at and it was just like, oh man, yikes. But they really need somebody to step up opposite of JC Horn, because it's not going to happen with the front. The pass rush isn't going to be the same that it was last year with Brian Burns out there terrorizing everybody. They're not going to be able to blitz as much with some of these guys. It's not like the second level of guys has a whole bunch of really terrific blitzers that they can bring on all these exotic looks. So you got to have somebody to give those guys time to get home with a little bit more of a slow burn pass rush. They need somebody to step up and be able to cover wide receiver 2s as JC Horn is following around wide receiver 1.
For me, I'm also going to the defensive side. I said they got rid of a lot of the talent on the defensive side of the ball, and they really have. So like that's not great for them, but they do need some guys to step up, especially without Brian Burns. So I'm going to stick to the defensive line. I'm going to go with Derek Brown, early round draft pick out of Auburn. Quietly has become arguably the best run defending like 3-tech in the NFL over the past 4 years. Like he is exceptional versus the run. Now he mostly plays 3-tech, a little like they have those weird fronts. So he sometimes plays out as like over the tackle as like a 5-tech, but great run defender. Okay pass rusher. He's a power pass rusher. He's never going to put up huge numbers, but he does disrupt the pocket. So like, I think his pass rush game needs to take another step, especially now without Brian Burns. They don't have that go-to winner. Yeah, they bring in a Jatavion Clowney and a DJ Wanham off the edge, and like they're going to try to work up some pressure packages with Evero at the helm. But I do think that Derek Brown needs to take that next step as a pass rusher. He's shown signs over these past couple seasons. Elite run defender, needs to get a little bit better as a pass rusher, but like he really could take that next step to joining some of these defensive tackles that are getting big time paid. Like there's a lot of guys out there getting paid right now. Being the best run defending 3-tech isn't like a great way to get a lot of money, but all of a sudden you come out with 7, 8, 9 sack season, you stack that up, maybe hit double digits. Like you're looking at a huge payday down the line, especially because that run defense pedigree is never going to go away.
He did get the bag. Surprisingly, he got a $24 million APY. Is that Derek Brown? I'll go with Xavier Legette, and this is a player to watch in Week 12 of the 2024 season. If the offense for the Carolina Panthers is going to show signs, he's got to be involved in that offense, finding some success. He's a guy that can stretch the field a little bit for them vertically, and he's kind of an interesting player because, like, I think the skill set's pretty narrow. It's a lot of downfield stuff as a big, massive receiver. Or it's, maybe trying to catch it underneath and running through a defense and trying to, sneak out the back door. But I think this is a guy that can kind of unlock things for Bryce Young. If you can find ways to get him the ball successfully down the field, he should have the time to be able to do it. And this is a skill set that, could, some people have compared him to a DK Metcalf with some of the physicality and some of that kind of stuff. But I think this is a vertical plane type receiver that could really, influence this Panthers offense in a big way. So if he's playing well in Week 12, it's gonna be a challenge offensively or defensively for the Kansas City Chiefs. How does this team beat the Chiefs, Craig?
A tire iron to Patrick Mahomes' knee. No,
don't say that.
It's fine. I say that every offseason. It hasn't happened yet. So I'm just saying. Just
comes
saying.
in once.
No,
and just...
They got a little juice. They do. Jonathan Brooks, Jatavian Sanders, Xavier Legette have some juice. If this Chiefs defense, for whatever reason, has a big letdown game, I expect that they're not going to be necessarily as great as they were last year, but still good, a really good defense. If they take their foot off the gas a little bit and allow the Bryce Young Panthers to get some explosive plays going, this could be a game. It could be one where the Chiefs offense maybe has to throw out their original playbook and say, oh crap, we're in a little bit more of a dogfight, and maybe the offense isn't able to get started. I just talked about how they're probably going to be able to move the ball. The defense is not particularly good. I fully believe that, but we have seen times, especially at this point in the season, where maybe an opponent that's not as good as some of the other ones that the Chiefs get up for around the other opponents that they're playing, they kind of let them sneakily hang around for a little bit. Maybe Jonathan Brooks has a big day on the ground. Now all of a sudden the Chiefs are in a hole. So I do think that there is some explosive playmakers on this offense. If they're able to get all of those guys going, it might end up being a game that go the way.
Yeah, I think it's a sleepy game for the Chiefs, right? So the Chiefs have their bye in mid-October, and they come back and they get the San Francisco 49ers. On the road. Then they get the Las Vegas Raiders on the road. That's the first time playing the Raiders since they beat them. Talk a little bit of trash. Okay, the Bucks, not the hardest game there, but like it's a primetime game following the Bucks. And then they get the Denver Broncos. Again, the divisional game. Then you have the Broncos. Then you have the Bills. Then you get the Panthers before short rest because you go from playing on Sunday to playing the Raiders again that Friday after Thanksgiving, right? So there's that short rest coming up. You're coming off of, I don't want to say like a super hard stretch, but a not easy stretch of games where stuff's kind of happening. Where there's probably a lot of emotional highs, lows, dumping it out. You could see the Chiefs come in here at a 1 p.m. game, Eastern, in Carolina, and laying in a little bit of an egg, playing sleepy, kind of going through the motions, trying not to show too much before they have another divisional game coming up. You would expect the Chiefs' talent to just overwhelm the Panthers at some point, especially this time of the year, if the Panthers don't take the steps that we've kind of been talking about this whole time of being like, hey, we can do that. And maybe that just the Panthers give up. They don't play hard, or maybe they're doing well and they're playing hard. Maybe they're battling for the NFC South because it's a terrible division with the boring Saints in it. Who knows at that point in time, but just the Chiefs playing a nice sleepy game, the Panthers playing up to their A game. I honestly could see that game becoming much bigger of a nail biter than it should be given where it falls in the schedule. A la the last time the Chiefs played the Carolina Panthers and Teddy Bridgewater worked his magic.
We've seen teams like this sneak up on the Chiefs before. Even pre-Mahomes, just like this has happened before where we've all picked blowouts. We've only picked blowouts with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback in our existence because this show's only existed in his tenure. But we've seen the Chiefs hang around or let really bad teams hang around with them. Who is the non-Mahomes Chiefs MVP? Craig?
Xavier Worthy in this game. I think J.C. Horn's going to follow around Hollywood Brown. They're going to place, an increased kind of attention on Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice. And I just feel like this is one of those that Xavier Worthy's going to be able to get behind this defense often. And I think Patrick Mahomes is going to look to kind of stretch it early, get up on this team early, force them into a one-dimensional game that takes Jonathan Brooks a little more out of it. He can certainly catch the ball, but force the Panthers into a pass-heavy game plan and just kind of, take your foot off the gas late in the game. Have Isaiah Pacheco run the ball. I think this is a big Xavier Worthy game. He catches a couple of deep passes, maybe a touchdown, really kind of, it puts the league on notice late in the season. It's like, oh, hey, yeah. Remember that we've got Xavier Worthy that we drafted in the first round, and you got to take care of him over the top.
That would be Craig Stout. I know this may be surprising to the new listeners of this
Josh,
podcast.
Shut up. You've been saying my name just as much as these two on your podcast.
Is a pillar of KCSN, arguably the strongest pillar, and he has been nice enough to grace us with his appearance this evening. We haven't talked about the Panthers defense a ton. We especially haven't mentioned a single safety or linebacker's name. So Travis Kelce could have a big game here, but I'm actually going to go with Charles Omenihu for this one. Because I think this time of the year is when he should be kind of rounding into shape from his injury. This is when he should start to get healthier. He should start kind of finding his footing, get back on track of where he was going last year before he got injured. And I think looking at this Panthers offensive tackle position, Ike Ekwonu didn't have the greatest start so far to his career. He looks powerful, just slow-footed. He doesn't look like a guy that's ready to handle some NFL speed on the edge all the time. Taylor Moton, another guy that can get beaten by some speed, by a guy that's a good technical rusher. So I could see this being a big game for somebody like Omenihu, who's rounding into shape this time of year, having a big performance. And then, when they kick him to the inside, he's got arms that reach up to the sky. And like Bryce Young can't even see the sky from where he stands.
Him and Chris Jones just wreaking havoc on.
Over under 1.5 George Karlaftis water polos in this game. Like not him batting a ball down, just being mentioned.
Over. Oh, being mentioned? Over. Still. That makes it easier. The over got easier to hit now.
Yeah, I know we've spent some time, and I mentioned earlier, like, hey, look, we've talked about, this team, not blowing out teams that they should. And, maybe they don't always take teams seriously. They're holding stuff back, and, you really can't overlook any opponent. My non-Mahomes MVP is Carson Wentz. who I think is going to put a great performance together in the second half of this game.
Handing the ball off?
Turn around, he's the MVP because he's keeping Patrick Mahomes off the field and in a visor because the game doesn't get out of hand. So that's why. And hey, look, you gotta let Carson Wentz look. Part of this whole Carson Wentz experience is you got to give him a few opportunities to show what he's capable of. He's trying to bounce back to 2025. He's trying to get a look here or there. So this will be a great chance for Carson Wentz to get some work heading into the postseason. And hopefully it's the last time we really have to see him. It's been
was this related to the tire iron theory that Craig had?
I don't know. No. I don't like your answer. This is just him getting some work in because Mahomes doesn't have to play because they're up. That's all. Okay. It's a Chiefs blowout joke if you listen to the intro to it. I shouldn't have to explain that, but that's okay. It's been a pleasure to have a friend of the show, Craig Stout, on today.
I'm a friend of the show now. I love it.
Hey, Craig,
will you stop talking about me now that I'm just a friend of the show?
Craig, we want to give you a chance. Where can we find your work?
Nowhere.
The moon.
On business jets. Just business jets now. Nowhere else.
Going to the moon.
Where's your next tea time?
My next tea time. I don't have
on
one yet.
Moon.
Will it be at the KCSN golf tournament?
A decent amount on the moon, Maddie.
See? Do you have any final words for us, Craig, before we get out of here?
No. Love y'all. Really missed doing this. This was a lot of fun. Just as fun as I expected it would be with the two of you. Keep holding it down. You're doing fantastic work outside of all the times that you mentioned me. So cut that shit out. And then, everybody keep listening. We're getting closer to the season. This is Spot 2B.
We're not guessing the line?
No.
Is it home or away?
Maddie, it's in your backyard.
Oh, sweet. Chiefs by 8.5.
I guess we are guessing the line.
You don't have to. You can just close the show now. I thought that was going to be the outro. Was just me doing that.
All right, that's gonna do it.
Better.
It's gonna do it for the KC Laboratory. It felt like the most whole we've been in a while, and it was great to have our dear friend Craig Stout back. We love you. We appreciate you. That was for Craig. That wasn't for all of you, but we do love and appreciate you guys too. We'll catch you later.
Can't call me a liar. I told you he's okay. Keep asking him though. Make sure he's good.
Yeah, double check.